So during my career as a Scrum Master and team lead, there have been numerous situations where a team was moving a task from one sprint to another because it just was so big that it didn't make it, they didn't fit it into one. Or there would have been refinements where I asked the team, okay, so how can we split this? And the team immediately described it as it cannot be split into smaller chunks even. And on the other hand, when I asked the product owner, how is the increment that we just delivered doing on the market, he said that it's not really on the market because we have to wait on other things or other layers of the overall solution till they catch up because they are still in the pipeline. So if those scenarios kind of sound familiar to you, I think I have like something that might help you out. So we'll be talking here about a framework or a method about how to split and slice bigger chunks of value for smaller increments so that we can just deliver them faster to the market, to the end customer. So my name is Tomasz Niemiec. This is the Dostarczaj Wartość channel, a Polish channel about delivering value. And today I will be talking about burgers and spiders. So how do you split features and user stories in a tasty and agile way? I'm gonna start by talking about the stuff that I will be not talking about. I know that this is strange, but bear with me here. So there is like a secret weapon, like an ultimate weapon for this kind of problems. It's called user story mapping, and it has been invented or popularized by Jeff Patton. There is a great book about it actually written by him, which I totally recommend. But that's like the holy grail in terms of weapons to slicing features and value. It's quite big, and what I want to talk to you about is something much smaller, something that works when the scope of what we are doing is a bit smaller. But okay, just a 30-second explanation to what story mapping is, and I really hope that Jeff Patton actually doesn't seize this video because I will be 30 seconds is not enough to describe basically everything that is going on in user story mapping, but just to give you an overall overhead. So we start with goals of our customers. So what are the goals that the customer wants to achieve from our product? Then we go down into the activities that the user is doing inside our system, our product to achieve those goals. And finally, if we think of options, by that I mean the ways we want our customer to reach his goals inside our product again or software. And why we are doing this? We are doing this by simply that we are now slicing, or we are looking at it, what can be delivered in terms of the options for our customers to achieve all of goals. So we take a marker or something, and we just draw a line that we call it our MVP. So that's a very basic, very simple explanation, but of course user story mapping is a lot more than just that, but in general, you could somehow summarize it as this one. So like I said, the thing I will be talking about is just a bit of smaller in scope, and that is going to be called, this is going to be the Hamburger method that was invented, or I read it on Gojko Adzic blog. I probably have murdered his surname, so sorry for that, Gojko. But I really like it. I have used it several times with my team, and I think that's actually a fun thing to do when you are actually thinking about splitting something that sounds big and you want just to have it sooner on the market. And the other thing will be a framework which is called SPIDR by Mike Cohn. That's also something I read on his blog, and I'm here pretty much sure that it's something that he invented actually. And this is really useful when splitting user stories, when you are on refinements, when you're talking with your team. So basically when you are thinking about the options, you have something bigger and now you think of all of the options in ways that we can actually deliver something. So this is the major scope of what I will be talking about. This was part of a presentation that I had in my company. So let's dig into it. So first, the Hamburger method, and we need to start with a scenario, with something that we want to actually implement. So Bartek, who is my co-host on the Dostarczaj Wartość podcast, helped me out a bit with a situation that is kind of related to his day-to-day work. So we have like a business case that is called like we want to organize an paid meetup for extraordinary developers that we actually want to hire. So a bit of a cheeky move, but I think it's still fine. So we've got that business case, and now we sit down with the team, with everyone who has his hands on actually delivering the product, and we think about, okay, so how can we achieve this? So the hamburger method starts with just like 2 bins, like the hamburger. And then we think about all of the layers, all of the, I would say, tasty ingredients that should be in a hamburger. So we think of those layers and we identify them. And next, what we do, we identify the quality metrics for each one of them. So when we have one of the layers, which would be mean that on-day verification on the day of the event, then we use a quality measure for that could be how fast are we able to process one person coming to the event, right? So that the line is not big. That could be the quality measure of the options. When it comes to emails, it could be like the personalization. So how personalized would be that email? And how much effort will be there on our side to actually send it out? Do we have to do it manually, or will something do that for us in a chunk, right? So this is the quality meters. When we have like what's good, what's bad for each of those layers, we then split the team. And I'm talking about splitting the team because usually this is done in a bigger groups. And I think that, brainstorming is overrated. It has a lot of problems with it. And I prefer to have smaller groups working on a solution than coming up together and deciding. So we split, if you have a bigger team, split them into several teams. In my example, it is 2. And they start by basically machine gunning ideas, options on how to implement a curtain layer. Of course, they think about all of them. They don't focus on one. We don't split the teams by one. They should focus on all options that they have possibly in their heads about how a particular layer of our overall solution can be implemented. When that is done, then come back and they combine the ideas together. We, of course, remove the duplicate ones or the ones that make totally no sense for anyone. We're added for fun. Sometimes that happens. And when we have this done, well, the hamburger is looking quite big, right? The ingredients are falling from the both sides, so we want to a bit trim it. And by the trimming part is being done by, we simply just look at the neighbors in one layer. We could say that you take a magnifying glass and just look at the 2 neighbors next to each other. And we know that we have them sequenced by quality, right? From worst to most quality option. So now we need to look at the effort of something that should be done. So because it may happen that a solution that is just a bit more quality actually would take a lot more effort to do, or even would take basically more effort to do. So the lower quality one would take more effort to do than the next one. So we just kind of look at the neighbors and we are just removing the ones that don't make sense actually to do. And the hamburger gets a bit smaller. Now it looks like a proper hamburger. And when we've got that done, what do you do with a hamburger? You eat it, right? So you take the first bite. You go through all the layers because you want to have the bite, I would say, fully. Like you want to really taste the meal that you are eating. So you take a bite through all of the layers. That's important, but you don't have to take only one option from a layer. If the team agrees basically that they want to take more, it's of course fine to them. The way I've been doing this with my teams is that I've been looking at what can be delivered in a sprint like increment, right? 1 sprint, 2 sprints or something like that. But we were trying to say to ourselves, okay, what can be delivered in 1 sprint? And we take the bite. Quite simple. And what happens next? We take another bite and another till the hamburger is basically done. So now to going back, I would say, to IT world and losing up the metaphor of meals, let's see at the summary of what we have. So we basically have split the overall solutions into 3 versions. Each version has all of the layers, but some layers move from one version to another because in a further version, there's just nothing to do in that layer, but it still works because it was worked on in the past ones. So 3 things here are that worth mentioning and are worth remembering. That each version is a complete solution. That's one. I already said that each version basically is a complete response to the customer's problems. It doesn't ask him to do half of the process or just skip a few parts that he actually wanted to do or anything. It's a full solution to his problem. Just the quality level, the significance of what we are doing is with each version a bit better for the customer. But in terms of solving the problem, we're doing this from the start. The other thing to remember here is the definition of done. So each version, even the first one, follows our definition of done that has been set by the team or by the organization overall for the team. And why I think this is crucially important is that I often have heard the conclusion that we should actually give up on the MVP term, right? That we should give up the minimum viable product and so on acronym, because usually what MVP means, it means shitty solution, right? It means just like half-baked code that doesn't have tests, or that everything basically just is like glued together with duct tape, and we call this like an MVP, and we just get it out as fast as possible. So no, like we are keeping the quality of the delivery at our company and our team level, in terms of code, in terms of this area. So I kind of make here a split between the quality of the solution, the quality of the code, right? By quality of the solution, I mean that more the significance of the advancement of the solution, not the quality inside the solution in terms of code or any standards that we actually want to keep. So the definition of done is kept even from the first version, which should be out as fast as possible. We are not going down in quality, right? So if our definition of done has automated tests and unit tests, we are doing them. We are not skipping them basically. And the third thing to remember here is that the version 2 and version 3 don't actually have to look like this, because an overall concept, what are we doing in Agile basically, is we are verifying assumptions. Everything we do are assumptions. We assume that a code will work as we do. TTD is basically just assuming that something will work. You check it, try again, and so on. So Agile is kind of also this way. We assume that something that we produced will resolve the client's problems. We assume that he will like it, and so on. And we need to, as fast as possible, verify it with the market, with the end customer. So the whole Agile, I would say, concept, regardless if you are working in Scrum, Kanban, or with any other framework, is about fast delivery and fast verification of assumptions, right? So after the first version is out, we will get feedback. We will get some data on how the customers like it or not, and this could influence, or even should influence, version 2 and version 3. So even though that we have a plan for what we would like to give the customers in the next versions, we should incorporate into that the feedback that we got from the first version. So that's also important. Now to go into the SPIDR framework that is created by and publicized by Mike Cohn. So the SPIDR acronym is I would say, short version of spikes, paths, interfaces, data, and rules. And I know that there is no E, but just bear with me, okay? So now we'll be going one by the letters, and I will explain to you, because all of those are ways on how we can approach the discussion of talking about splitting a user story. Sometimes all of them are applicable, sometimes it's one, so it's not like that. It's just there is no one which is better or worse. There are just different ways of starting the thinking process on how can we split something. Okay, so spikes. So for those of you that haven't worked with spikes in their projects, spikes are experiments. Sometimes when there is something very certain happening, we need to do a bit of an experimenting before coming up with a solution or before estimating something. And spikes are usually done in various, I would say, situations. So first of all, when you've got integrations with a third party or legacy system, you don't know it, you haven't worked with it, it's been not used for centuries, it's really dusty and so on. And you just need to check what exactly is there before jumping into developing something. So this is like one of the, I would say, scenarios. Other scenarios involve tech ventures. So when you are using a new tech for the first time, or you're using a new cloud service that basically appeared when you were sleeping, because that's how fast they are appearing. So a new cloud service has appeared. Or the third option that I see here is boldness. By boldness, I mean that we are actually trying to do something that hasn't been done by anyone in the world, right? We're really pioneering here, so this could also be a good situation to maybe think of extracting a spike from something, extracting a spike, doing the spike, and then coming back to the discussion about something in terms of estimation and how to resolve a certain user story or a feature. So this is, I would say, for spikes. Now, in terms of paths, paths usually start with the description of a user story and the acceptance criteria that you have for it, and it's a good way to just visualize it, right? So you listen to a user story and then you try to visualize, okay, how the user will be behaving. Okay, so this step, then this step, and so on. So you create like a path. And when you see branches coming up that the users might take different routes, these are basically our paths. So when you are developing, let's say, a communication feature for your customers to talk with your customer service, you could split it into mobile phoning, so you can let the customers call you by phone, and by email, or by a chat bot on your website, right? So you have those options. The first version of the product could launch only with an customer center working by phone and without any other, I would say, digital versions. It all depends on your customers. You probably need to check your demographic and what are your customers used to do and used to. Then this should be the solution that you take. This also applies to the second scenario that I have here, which is more often used and a better example somehow. Is about the ways to pay for something that you actually buy on eBay or on other, I would say, online store. You have the option to pay by credit card, pay by PayPal, or use Blik, which is the Polish version of how do you say it? It's a really fast, I would say, banking transfer. You have a token and you input it into an online store, and it's really fast processing the payment. So you don't have to actually put in all of the details of a banking account and so on. So that's really fast. So this is in terms of paths. Now, when we go to interfaces are basically, well, interfaces. They are the way that your customer is using your product, and you could think of it as, let's say, mobile phones, right? You could have like Android devices, iOS devices, and maybe then web devices or something on smart TVs and etc. Right? So these are our interfaces. Interfaces are also web browsers, and this is actually something that is very often happening when I work with teams, that we have certain features that are being pushed to different browsers in a different time, just because on the demographic. If we have more customers on the Firefox browser than in Chrome, then of course we're gonna like prioritize sending it first of all as in something that works on Firefox and then to Chrome. A good example of that is actually something that I saw on my mobile phone on Spotify. Is that now on Spotify mobile you can actually rate podcasts and give them a star rating, which is not available on other interfaces like your PC or your TV or console, right? The feature is not yet there. You can do it only from mobile. So that's exactly how Spotify probably has came up with. They saw where is their most users are listening podcasts through what of the mediums based on their data, and they are pushing this feature as first to that audience. So it makes sense, right? So you can that's how you use interfaces. Now the next one is data. And you can think of it as this is the data that we provide or that we collect for the customers. So an example here would be, let's say that you are creating online food delivery application. That is, well, you have now them, but let's assume that there are none, and you want to build the next basically app that will let people online request food delivered to their homes. And you have a lot of, I would say, food places in your city, but you know that the most popular thing for people to call in and order food are pizzas. So you start by collecting all the pizza stores and incorporating them into your database. Then you follow up with burgers and then sushi restaurants and so on, right? So you can always think of it as the data that we provide the customer in our app. This could be also like a splitting a way to doing it. Now coming to rules, and rules are a bit special. That's why I put the star next to them. But I will talk about it at the later stage. So what are rules? Rules are basically business rules that very often are written into user stories as acceptance criteria, or each one of them is separate user story. That also so often happens. And as an example of that, we could think of a system that has different states based on the user level that you log in as. So there could be a system that has like a user version, a manager version, and an administration version. So you don't actually have to create the whole process that figures out what's the right account type and so on right from the start. You don't have to even think about account types right from the start. You could basically start from the version that would be directed into regular users. You could start with that. Then when you touch a new scenario, let's say the manager version, that's when you put in the whole if statements based on the credentials, and finally you create the administration version. Now, if you're a financial like company or an organization, before someone can create an account for you, they have to go through certain checks. Like there is like an anti-money laundering check, or if the person is actually in debt or on a terrorist list or on a blacklist or whatever we want to call it. We have to do those checks before we actually create a financial account for that person in our company. So what could be done here is that, again, you start with a very basic form. You just have the registration form. You launch the whole process of someone like onboarding himself, and you create the account immediately. Now, I know this sounds risky, but hold on. Then you add the first check, the other checks, and that's how you create the whole package. So now coming back to the start that I said that this has. So when we are splitting something based on the business rules, it often happens that it's only delivered to production when the final rule has been applied. This makes sense. This is actually something that is forced upon us, and we should do it like this. That if we are splitting it this way, usually the production release happens only when we are fully done. But that doesn't mean that we cannot do with the increments that we created anything. We could invite like a group of customers to our office and show them the first increments and just get feedback on them. We could start using the app internally inside our company and just see how the user experience is happening. Should the buttons be actually round or more square? Should the colors be different? Is everything understandable when something is loading? What's your process in creating an account? Is that like also understandable for the customers? So we can all check all this while we're working on the other stuff in the meantime, but we all have something to collect feedback on. So that's why I think sometimes splitting it by business also helps. And yeah, so how to use the framework now that we have it fully? We start from paths, we go through basically interfaces to data, rules, and we finish up on spikes. Like I said, sometimes it might happen that all splitting, I would say, ways are correct and will work. But you don't have to split something by everything. If paths work, do it, basically. If interfaces work, do it, right? So there is no way that you have to go through all of them, but these are just the ways to help you get around the question: is this even supposed to be split, or can it be split? Now, why the spikes are at the end? And this is something that I always tell my teams and product owners and product managers, is that we shouldn't do spikes for everything that we do in a product or in a system, because the team is not actually learning to cope with some uncertainties, right? Doesn't learn or cope with surprises, which will always happen. And by doing a lot of spikes, we kind of create that false reality, or the false understanding that if we do enough analysis, if we do enough spikes before working on something, we can be sure 100% that this will be done by here and here, right? That nothing will happen. And we should avoid it, right? So there should be special occasions that I mentioned at the start of this method of when we do spikes, but not overdue with them. That's the recommendation from my side. So that's about everything. And now I would like just to leave you with three final advices that I would like also to remember when splitting something. So the first advice is slice vertical, not horizontal. I think that's correct. So go through all of the layers. You probably have known this and have heard about this, but that's really crucial. That if we are thinking about slicing something, we're thinking about delivering a complete solution to the customer, because we want to get feedback that is meaningful. We want to actually tell the customer, or make the customer tell us, should we actually even work more on this? Because if the first version will work greatly, there will be absolutely nothing else the customer wants or the market wants from the product that we delivered. We should start thinking about something else and not jump into the next versions immediately, right? Because the market doesn't actually need now anything else. So we should focus on something completely different. But that's only going to happen if we deliver the actual full taste of what the product is and what the solution for the customer problem actually is. The second thing of advice is that it's a team effort. Both, I would say, the Hamburger method and the SPIDR method needs to be done by the whole team. And by that team, I mean everyone who is responsible of getting that product to the market. So even if the marketing team is not part of your development team, but they are crucial for the success of the product, or they are crucial for delivering to the customers, they should be in those meetings when we discuss actually how to split the increments and so on, right? So remember that it only works as a collaborative effort, both of those methods. And the final advice is that smaller is good, but not too small, right? So it's always a team's internal perspective on when something is small enough or big enough for us. So you have to get to that point by yourself with your team. But if I would advise something, and this is how I usually did it with my team, is that if something is bigger than one sprint, we definitely slice it, right? So let's assume that after a few sprints, something that is like a 16-pointer or 8-pointer in story points is usually moving from one sprint on another, right? That is usually so big that it just falls over. So when we are doing refinement and there's something comes up, which is in 16, we immediately go, okay, yeah, so now let's think of slicing it, right? Because we know that we are not delivering it in one go. So that's in terms of how big. In terms of how small, I usually say to the team, look, if we actually put more effort into the splitting and adding it to Jira than doing it, I think that's enough, right? So you have to go there by yourself, but just remember that you don't have to split everything, and small is good, but not too small. And that's going to be all for today. That's everything I had to tell you about. Please leave a comment. Send feedback in the comments below on what do you think about the two methods, about this video. Did you like it? I hope to do more of them in English and in Polish. There is a Polish version also in the future. So looking forward to that. And yeah, happy slicing. See ya.